Hey everybody, I'm 𝗙𝗵𝗹𝗲𝗲, and in this video I've decided to tell you about my first day as a language teacher. And make sure to hit subscribe and click that bell notification to get notified of other videos that come out about language teaching. And in this video, I've decided to tell you about my first day as a language teacher. In my case, it was teaching English in an offline language center in Russia, and that was in 2009. Since then, I've really done a lot and played a lot of different roles in the language teaching industry. But in this video, I'm going to reminisce about the difficulties of getting started, and then I'm going to look back and share some of the insights that I've gained throughout my journey from there to where I am now. Right now, I own and manage multiple language teaching businesses online and offline, and I've been a teacher for nearly 10 years. I'm also a teacher trainer and a teacher recruiter, and the coolest thing that I get to do right now is I help other teachers set up their own teaching businesses. But you can learn more about that by clicking the links in the description of this video. Alright, I don't know what you've heard about Russia, but my first days of teaching were definitely not filled with borscht eating, vodka drinking, and bear chasing. In fact, from the point of view of a Westerner who doesn't know anything about Russia or its culture, Russians can be pretty intimidating.
You know, teacher, you bum from streets in the Detroit.
For the first few weeks, I always felt like I had to prove myself to my students and prove that I really was a teacher and I really could teach English. In fact, looking back, I remember having a few key questions running through my mind all the time. Will the students like me? Will I do a good job? Am I well prepared enough? What if... I mean, there were a lot of what if questions, but what if they ask me something that I don't know? Will they feel like they've learned something? And will I get fired? I had all these situations just build up in my head, you know, like, what if they don't like me? Is Boris over there gonna break the desk in half and tell me that if I don't explain phrasal verbs differently, then he's gonna send me to a gulag? Or when I tell the students that they need to study English, are they gonna tell me,
no, in Mother Russia, English study you.
I had a lot of things running through my head and I really didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't very confident and I wasn't sure that I was going to do a good job. I kind of had this fear in the back of my mind that I was going to get stage fright and wet my pants or do something else really embarrassing. After all, it was just my first day teaching a group of people something that I had only been trained on. Plus, my boss, Elena, wasn't the friendliest lady I'd ever met. I was pretty sure that if students weren't satisfied with what I did, that I wouldn't get my first month's salary. And that brought on panic attack number 2, which was basically me saying, am I well enough prepared for this? You know, I had looked through all the material front and back about 25 times, and I had made so many printed copies of the handouts that I was going to give to all of the students, but I still had this lingering suspicion that I had forgotten something. Had I made enough photocopies for everyone? The last thing I wanted was for one of my students to call me out and say, "Chris, why you no give me copy? You no understand how count?" Or what if I ran out of material and we just sat there in silence for the last 5 minutes of the lesson? I couldn't imagine anything worse than trying to improvise and just watching them sit in silence, staring at the clock, counting down the seconds until they run out of my torturous English lesson like a defector escaping the USSR. The biggest concerns that I had were all of the what if questions. Like, what if they ask me things that I don't know? I mean, sure, I had studied teaching, I was certified to teach, I had prepared all of my lesson material and I'd looked over it many, many times. But what if they tried to test me? What if they asked something that I had absolutely no idea about? That totally freaked me out. Another question that was just bouncing around in my head was, will my students feel that they have learned something? I wasn't very sure that they would. And if they didn't, would they report me to my boss and get me fired? Would I be on the next plane back to the US? Or maybe they would just confiscate my passport, rip it up, or tell me to start walking, and I would end up having the same fate as a soldier in Napoleon Bonaparte's battalion. So yeah, I had a lot of doubts. Luckily, I got through it with just a couple scratches, you know, nothing serious. And I'm better off having gone through it and having had those experiences. But I totally understand the fears and doubts that new teachers have when they go to teach for the first time. So here are some tips that I can give you that have helped me overcome obstacles along the way. And these are really just things that I wish I had known and understood back when I was just getting started. What you should know that differentiates experienced teachers and new teachers is that It's not about students liking you or not liking you. It's about getting results for your students. I remember somebody telling me that the student is always right. You know, you have to do what they want and do what they say because they're paying you and they're paying your school. And I couldn't disagree more. The student is paying you and paying the school to get them a result. They are the student. You are the teacher. That means you probably know how to get them the result that they want better than they do. If you just kiss your students' behinds all the time and give them everything that they want, then you aren't very likely to get the result that they paid for. Also, when you waste a bunch of time trying to make people like you, you actually do the opposite. You know, you're trying to make them feel like you're their friend, but they already know that you're not their friend. And they don't really care if you like them or not, because they just need to get the result. They are paying to be there, and they're paying for your service. You're providing a service. Remember that, and don't let yourself be fooled into thinking that because you spend a few hours together every week, that now you're best friends. Another thing is that experienced teachers don't think about doing a good job or not. They know what they're doing. They're confident about how they do it. And doing a bad job isn't even an option for them. It's something that just never crosses their mind because they've presented this material and taught this material and done these lesson plans so many times, there's no way that it can go wrong. It's just not even an option in their minds. So instead of worrying about if they do a good job or a bad job, they would just be shocked if it turned out that they did a bad job because they've done it so many times. I mean, they don't think about it as good or bad. They just do what needs to be done to get the result. They get the result for their students. That means they did a good job. Experienced teachers are also never underprepared because they understand that if they have to teach one lesson, they need to be prepared for 5 lessons. On top of that, they've been teaching for so long that they have an arsenal of activities in their minds that they can spit out at any moment. Anytime a student gives them a cue that they don't really know this concept or they're unsure of something, experienced teachers have an activity that they can just dive right into and they can solve that problem immediately. This comes with time, but you can use it to your advantage by understanding that if you have 1 lesson scheduled, you need to be prepared to teach 5 lessons. Or you need to have 5 times as much material planned as you would for 1 lesson. Another thing is that experienced teachers don't wonder, what's going to happen if they ask a question and I don't know the answer? They don't worry about this at all because they have a lesson plan and they know that if there's an unrelated question, they can always say, we're not talking about that today. This is our lesson plan. This is what we're doing today. We'll talk about that later. Or we'll talk about that next time. Even if you have no idea what the answer to their question is, you can always just say, we're going to talk about it later or we're going to talk about it next time, and then you can continue with your lesson plan because you're prepared and you can come back to it later if you find the answer, or you can do your homework after the lesson finishes and come back next lesson and tell them about the answer then. That's what experienced teachers do. Overall, the most important thing to do when you're teaching is have confidence. By being confident about your lesson plan and about what you're doing in the classroom, you're going to solve 99% of all of the problems that arise for new teachers. Stop worrying that you won't be able to do things and start making a plan for how to do the things that you don't know how to do right now. Put simply, the difference between an experienced teacher and a new teacher is having a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're right to feel worried and nervous, and your students are right to think that you're not a pro. But if you do get nervous, don't sweat it, it happens to everyone. I mean, look at me. I was absolutely shaking before my first lessons. And now I have multiple teaching businesses. I still teach, I train teachers, I recruit teachers, and I show teachers how to set up their own teaching businesses. That's a huge transformation. And if I was able to do it, then you'll definitely be able to do it too. Just be confident in your own ability to figure it out. That's all for this video. Make sure you press like, press subscribe, and hit that bell notification too so you get notified when new videos come out about language teaching. Leave a comment down below and let me know how your first day of teaching went. I'll see you guys in the next video.